The first thing Captain Elias Ward noticed was that the stars were wrong. He leaned over the plotting table as his helmsman fought the stabilizers. The ship's bulk groaned like a wounded animal, hull plates creaking after the jump. Half the bridge lights were dead. Emergency systems flickered red across the consoles. "Status!" Ward barked. "Drive core stable," Lieutenant Carson replied, voice trembling. "But, sir, navigation's offline. Stellar map can't get a fix on anything. None of these constellations match." Ward's jaw tightened. "Try manual calibration." Carson swallowed. "I did, sir, twice." Ward turned toward the viewport. Beyond the armored glass, space looked like space always did, endless, indifferent. But something in the pattern of stars felt wrong. Subtle shifts, faint brightness differences. He'd spent 20 years aboard the Dauntless. He knew what Sol's neighborhood looked like. This wasn't it. The communications officer, Ensign Lee, raised her head from her console. "Captain." "We're being hailed," Ward turned sharply. "By who?" "No Federation signature. Unknown source. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge wasn't human. It was precise, cold, layered, synthesized through a dozen modulations. "Unidentified vessel. You have entered Imperial jurisdiction. Identify yourself and submit to docking protocols, or you will be destroyed." Murmurs rippled across the bridge. Ward exhaled slowly. "That's not any known tongue from our sectors." Lee shook her head. "Translation algorithms guessing. Some kind of derived Terran structure, but evolved." "Patch me through." Lee nodded. "Channel open." Ward straightened, clasping his hands behind his back, voice steady. "This is Captain Elias Ward, commanding officer of the United Systems Navy ship Dauntless. We sustained catastrophic FTL malfunction during combat operations, requesting assistance and coordinates for nearest human colony." There was a pause. Then, "Repeat your identification." Ward frowned. "Dauntless. United Systems Navy, human." Another pause, longer this time. Then a different voice came through, older, colder. "Human? That designation is ancient." Ward's blood ran cold. "Sir," Carson whispered, "we're surrounded." On the tactical display, dozens of signatures flared to life. Massive vessels, each easily 3 times the Dauntless's displacement. Sleek, blade-like ships arranged in a formation that spoke of absolute control. Multiple contacts. "Vectoring in from all directions," said the weapons officer, Lieutenant Avery. "Their energy output's off the charts. They've locked sensors on us." Ward clenched his jaw. "Raise defensive grid." "Power main batteries." "Sir, we're outnumbered 20-1. "I said power them." Avery hesitated, then complied. The low hum of capacitors charging filled the bridge. The Dauntless's ancient railguns, relics of a war long forgotten, rotated into firing alignment. The comm crackled again. "You will power down your weapons." "You will submit to Imperial boarding authority," Ward replied calmly. "Negative. We are a sovereign vessel." "You will hold position." The alien voice grew sharp. "You misunderstand, Captain. The Empire does not ask." The channel went dead. Silence pressed down like gravity. Ward's mind raced. If this was some kind of first contact scenario, and God help him it looked that way, then showing weakness would be suicide. He looked at the tactical screen again. Every instinct screamed that the Dauntless wasn't supposed to be here. "Helm," he said quietly. "Bring us about. Face the nearest ship. Let them see we're not running." Carson nodded shakily. "Aye, sir." The Dauntless turned slowly, presenting its armored bow toward the largest of the enemy vessels. The old cruiser's hull bore the scars of 50 engagements, kinetic gouges, plasma burns, melted armor plates. Yet it still looked defiant under the light of foreign stars. Ward's hand hovered over the command console. He didn't want to fight. But the Empire, whoever they were, didn't sound interested in peace. Then, suddenly, the Dauntless's targeting computer pinged. "Sir," Avery said softly, "they've locked onto us." Ward's heart thudded. "Weapons hot." He took a breath, every muscle tight. "Broadcast one final message." Lee nodded. Ward leaned toward the mic. "Unknown vessels, this is your final warning. Any hostile action will be met with immediate counterforce." For 5 long seconds, there was no response. The stars held their breath. Then, a flare. A beam of white energy lanced across space, striking the Dauntless's forward shields. The ship rocked violently. Sparks cascaded from the overhead conduits. "Hit amidships!" Shields holding at 60%. Ward steadied himself, his voice a cold whisper. "Return fire." The railguns fired. Twin spears of tungsten slammed into the enemy vessel at relativistic velocity. The impact shredded its shields, tore through armor, and detonated deep within its core. A sun-bright explosion rippled. Outward, fragments scattering like meteors. The Imperial fleet froze. Their ships, untouched for centuries by any true war, had just watched one of their own be vaporized by a vessel older than their civilization. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Captain Ward watched the fireball fade. "Target next contact," he said quietly. Outside, the human warship turned, engines burning cold and blue. Its guns reloaded with the methodical rhythm of an executioner preparing the next shot. The Empire's scanners lit up, hundreds of lock warnings, dozens of command relays screaming across the network. In the silence that followed, every admiral, every strategist, every ruler in the Galactic Empire realized the same terrible thing. They weren't ready for war, and humanity, the species they thought extinct, had just arrived. The explosion from the destroyed Imperial frigate still burned across the void, a silent blossom of vaporized metal and radiation. For a heartbeat, the stars themselves seemed to recoil. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the deck vibrated with the slow, deep thrum of the reactor cycling up to full combat power. Captain Elias Ward stood over the tactical display, a sea of red icons blooming faster than the ship's systems could label them. "Multiple bogies vectoring in," shouted Lieutenant Avery. "Estimate 40 capital ships plus escorts." Lieutenant Carson's fingers flew over navigation controls. "They're coordinating a pincer." "They're fast, sir. Faster than we can compensate." Ward's eyes narrowed. "They're used to soft targets. Let's remind them what hard vacuum feels like." A low chuckle rippled across the bridge. Brittle, nervous. Everyone was terrified, but Ward's voice carried a weight that steadied them. The Dauntless wasn't just a warship. It was a relic of Earth's last great war, built when humanity still remembered how to fight with desperation. "Helm," Ward said. "Vector 379 by 60. Pitch 10 degrees down. I want their formation split." "Aye, Captain." The cruiser banked, its massive thrusters cutting arcs of plasma against the darkness. Enemy fire followed, lances of white energy that screamed past like comets. When they hit, they didn't explode, they peeled. Layers of ablative armor curled off in molten ribbons, forward shields collapsing. "Divert power from aft," Ward barked. "Sir, that'll expose the engines." "Then don't get hit." The bridge shook violently as another beam grazed the starboard flank. Alarms flared. The Dauntless was bleeding metal but still alive. "Targets locked," said Avery. 4 enemy ships within railgun range." Ward nodded. "Fire sequence Alpha." The recoil thundered through the hull as the rail batteries unleashed, solid tungsten, magnetically accelerated to near light speed. No glow, no drama. Just raw physics. Each slug crossed hundreds of kilometers in less than a second. 3 enemy ships blinked out of existence. The 4th spun out of control, venting atmosphere in a spiral of white frost. Ward turned to his XO Commander Hale. "They rely on energy warfare. Their shields are tuned for plasma and light. They don't even have armor worth the name." Hale nodded grimly. "They've forgotten kinetic combat." "Good," Ward said. "We'll teach them again." On the Vorath, command ship of the Imperial 6th Fleet, Admiral Koras stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human ship's projectiles were invisible to their sensors. No heat signature, no plasma trail. The Imperial fleet's shields, designed for centuries to counter energy discharges, barely registered the incoming impacts before they hit. "Admiral," a sensor officer stammered. "That vessel just destroyed 3 cruisers and a corvette in under 8 seconds." "Impossible," Koras hissed. "Their technology reads primitive." "Yes, sir, but form a full sphere formation." "I want a saturation barrage. Everything we have." "Yes, Admiral." Across the fleet, thousands of beam emitters charged. The vacuum lit up like a sunburst as the Imperial ships unleashed their fury. On the Dauntless, the hull screamed. The bridge went red with warning lights. Shields flickered. One of the aft batteries exploded, venting compartment pressure into space. "Deck 12 breach," Lee shouted. "Containment field's failing." Ward grabbed the comm mic. "Seal it off. Evacuate non-essential crew to armored stations. No one dies for nothing." He glanced at the tactical overlay. They were outnumbered 100-1. The Dauntless couldn't win, but maybe it could hurt them. "Helm," Ward said. "Cut power to primary drives. Bleed reactor output into rail capacitors. Overload them if you have to." Carson blinked. "Sir, that'll fry the coils. Then they'll burn bright." Carson hesitated, then nodded. "Aye, sir." Ward looked out the viewport. The enemy fleet's light show was beautiful. Beams of energy slashing across the void, flaring against the Dauntless's battered shields. He remembered his academy days, when Earth's last war ended in silence and orbital debris. He'd sworn no human ship would ever die quietly again. He keyed the internal channel. "This is the captain. All hands brace for emergency firing sequence. We're not going down today. We're making history." A chorus of voices responded through the ship's comms. Shaky but fierce. "Firing sequence ready," Avery said. "All barrels charged." Fire! The Dauntless erupted. Every railgun, coil gun, and auxiliary launcher fired in coordinated fury. The ship shuddered under the recoil, its internal braces creaking. Slugs tore through vacuum like invisible gods' hammers. Imperial ships disintegrated under kinetic hellfire, armor shattering, reactors overloading. Admiral Chorus watched as one of his dreadnoughts broke apart, its central spine punctured clean through. The explosion rippled across his fleet's formation, throwing dozens of vessels into chaos. "Admiral, we can't track their projectiles. They're too fast." "Then blind fire. Anything." But the Dauntless had already moved, a wounded predator drifting through the battlefield, guns glowing red-hot. Minutes stretched like hours. On the Dauntless, smoke filled the bridge. A power conduit had burst overhead. Sparks rained onto the deck. Ward's shoulder bled from shrapnel, but he didn't feel it. "Status. Structural integrity at 40%, Hale said. "Weapons. Half offline. Reactor overheating. Enemy casualties? 17 confirmed kills. Another dozen crippled." Ward's lips curved into a grim smile. "Not bad for a ghost ship." The comm crackled again. The same cold alien voice, now tinged with something that almost sounded like fear. "Human vessel. Cease fire, we will negotiate." Ward stared at the comm display, blood still dripping from his hand. "They want to talk now." Hale looked at him. "What do we do, sir?" Ward considered. His mind raced, a dozen tactical factors colliding. The Dauntless was dying. Half the crew would suffocate within an hour if life support failed. But they'd proven something monumental. The Empire could bleed. He looked back at the stars, alien, unfamiliar, yet now streaked with debris that glowed faintly blue. "They called us ancient," he murmured. "Maybe we are, but ancient doesn't mean weak." He straightened. "Open a channel." Lee hesitated. "Aye, Captain." "Channel open." Ward's voice came low and steady. "This is Captain Ward of the United Systems Navy. We came here by accident. But make no mistake, humanity doesn't bow." There was silence on the line. Then a response, faint but audible. "Your defiance will bring annihilation." Ward smiled thinly. "You'll have to try harder than that." He gestured to Avery. "Arm the last rail batteries." Hale turned sharply. "Sir, we can't take another hit." "If we fire, the reactor might breach." "I know." Ward placed a hand on the rail battery control. His expression softened, not with fear, but with resolve. "If this ship's going to die, it's going to die loud enough that they remember our name." The bridge fell silent. No one argued. Avery's fingers hovered over the trigger. "Ready, Captain." Ward nodded. "Fire." The Dauntless unleashed one last terrible salvo, a broadside that burned every capacitor, melted every coil. The recoil cracked hull plates and sent debris spiraling off into space. The slugs found their marks. 3 enemy dreadnoughts vaporized, their reactors erupting in white fire. The shockwave rippled outward, scattering the formation. On every Imperial channel, the same phrase echoed from stunned officers and terrified analysts alike. It's human. The warship is human. And across the stars, fear spread faster than light. The Dauntless drifted silently through the wreckage. Its lights dimmed, its reactor cooling. On the bridge, Ward leaned against the console, breathing raggedly. Carson looked up from his burned-out controls. "Captain, reactor's offline. We're dead in space." Ward nodded slowly. "Then let them come." He gazed at the distant ships regrouping, massive silhouettes moving cautiously now, like predators that had just realized their prey could bite. "Let them come," Ward repeated, softer this time. "They'll see what humanity does when cornered." Outside, the wreckage of the Imperial fleet floated like frozen ghosts. Somewhere beyond, orders were already being given. Armies would mobilize. Scientists would dissect the battle. Politicians would panic, and far away, the name Dauntless would become a whisper, a warning across the Galactic Empire. The wreckage of the Imperial fleet drifted like a steel graveyard. Frozen bodies tumbled among shattered hulls. Radiation halos shimmered faintly where reactors had ruptured. The once pristine sector, the edge of the Empire's outer rim, had become a silent monument to something the galaxy had not seen in millennia. A human victory. The Dauntless hung at the center of it all, crippled but unbowed. Her once white hull was blackened and cracked, armor peeled in jagged wounds. The proud letters, USNS Dauntless, were half burned away. Inside, the air was thin, metallic, and hot. Emergency lights pulsed dimly through drifting smoke. Captain Elias Ward sat alone in the command chair, eyes fixed on the dying console lights. His uniform was torn. His hands were slick with blood that had long since dried. Around him, the bridge crew worked in exhausted silence. No shouting now, only the slow rhythm of survival. "Life support down to 20%, Commander Hale reported, her voice hoarse. "Reactor's dead. We've got 6 hours before we suffocate," Ward nodded absently. "Any sign of movement out there?" Avery squinted at his static-filled display. "Scans show a few enemy signatures still active, sir. They're keeping distance. Looks like they're afraid to come closer." Ward managed a faint, grim smile. "They should be." Silence lingered, not peaceful but solemn. The hum of dying systems was the only sound left between them and the void. On the Imperial capital world of Zerath Prime, panic rippled through the halls of power. Fleet Command demanded explanations that no one could give. How had a single vessel, using projectile weapons, annihilated half a fleet of ships shielded by the most advanced energy fields in the galaxy? In the Imperial Science Council, theories collided like debris. Some claimed the human ship was a remnant of a forgotten civilization, an archaeological phantom. Others whispered of a military experiment gone wrong. But one archivist, sifting through restricted data, found an ancient reference: humanity. Precursor species. Self-extinct. Designation: Terran origin, 03. He replayed the footage of the battle. The black ship. The kinetic impacts, the burning wrecks, and realized the Empire had just rediscovered a ghost that could kill. And across the galaxy, the word human began to spread like contagion. Back aboard the Dauntless, the air was growing thin. Frost formed on the bulkheads where heat had escaped into the void. Ward stood near the viewport, staring at the ruins of the Imperial dreadnought that had fired the first shot. Its hull still burned, a silent torch in the dark. Lee approached quietly. "Captain," she said, "we're picking up a transmission. From the Empire?" She nodded. "Encrypted. Weak but directed at us. Put it through." The speakers crackled, and then a voice, weary, bitter, but unmistakably alive. "Human vessel, this is Admiral Chorus of the Imperial 6th Fleet. You fought well. Your weapons are impressive. You will power down remaining systems and surrender. We offer protection." Ward couldn't help but laugh. A dry, disbelieving sound. "Protection?" Hale frowned. "They're trying to board us again," Ward shook his head slowly. No, they're trying to understand us. They're afraid. He walked to the comm station and leaned close to the mic. His voice came out quiet, but steady as iron. Admiral Chorus, this is Captain Elias Ward of the United Systems Navy. You should understand something before you come any closer. He paused. The crew watched him in silence. When humanity fights, he said, it's not for conquest, not for empire. We fight because something tried to end us once, and we swore never to let that happen again. If you board this ship, you'll learn what that promise means. For a long moment, there was no reply. Then, softly, almost like a confession, Chorus's voice returned. We didn't think your kind existed anymore. Ward's eyes narrowed. Maybe we didn't, but you'll remember us now. He cut the channel. Hours passed. The Dauntless grew colder. The air thinned to a whisper. The bridge lights dimmed until only the emergency glow remained. Ward stood before the main viewport, looking out at the carnage. His breath misted in the frigid air. Carson's voice broke the quiet. Captain, oxygen's almost gone. Ward nodded slowly. Seal the bridge! Everyone strap in. Hale frowned. Sir? Ward turned toward the reactor console. We can't restart the drive, but we can use what's left of the fusion cells to ignite the core. Controlled detonation. Enough to vaporize what's left of this wreck and anything still scanning us. A stunned silence followed. Sir? Hale's voice was quiet. That'll kill us. Ward looked at her. It'll keep them from dissecting us, from learning how to fight us. Avery's hands trembled on his console. We'll go out like the Dauntless always wanted, fighting. Ward gave a faint smile. Exactly. They worked in silence, every move slow, deliberate. The bridge filled with the soft hiss of leaking oxygen and the hum of charging capacitors. Lee's hands shook as she input the final sequence. Captain, detonation control ready, Ward nodded. Transmit one message on all open bands, every frequency you can find. Lee hesitated. What do I say? Ward took a deep breath. Record this. He stared out at the alien stars and spoke. To whoever's listening, this is Captain Elias Ward of the United Systems Navy ship Dauntless. Humanity endures. We do not kneel. We do not forget. You came for a ghost. Now you've met one. If this is our last transmission, remember what destroyed your fleet. Remember that humanity fights to the last. Lee's voice broke as she finished encoding the message. Transmission sent, sir. Ward exhaled slowly. Good. Then let's finish this. Far across the battlefield on the Vorath, Admiral Chorus watched in silence as the human ship flared on his sensors, a slow, growing pulse of radiation. Admiral? His adjutant asked nervously. Chorus didn't answer. He already knew. The pulse intensified. Then, in a burst of light brighter than any star, the Dauntless vanished. The shockwave rippled through debris, scattering the remains of the fleet. When it faded, there was nothing left but silence. Weeks later, the Empire declared the Thalri sector a restricted zone. No ship was allowed within 1,000,000 kilometers of the battle site. Yet whispers persisted, of a signal still echoing faintly from the void, repeating every few hours. Humanity endures. We do not kneel. It became a myth, then a warning. Imperial officers began to use it as a curse. Don't wake the humans. And in the decades that followed, something strange happened. Scattered across the galaxy, ancient Terran artifacts began to activate, dormant satellites, long-forgotten probes, and encrypted beacons sending the same coded phrase, Dauntless survived. No one could trace it. No one could prove it. But the Empire never slept easy again, back in that cold, distant corner of space where light itself moved slowly through the wreckage. A single, flickering signal pulsed from the ruins of the Dauntless's blackened hull. A voice, faint, fragmented but unmistakably human, whispered into the void. This is Captain Ward. Dauntless holding position. Mission continues, then static and silence.